You might be watching this and wondering, if Christianity is true, why do so many Christians act so unlike Jesus? That's not necessarily a cheap shot. It might be a very sincere question. It's one I've heard from thoughtful, even hopeful people who want to believe, but find themselves stumbling over the very people who claim to follow Christ. The struggle is real, and it makes sense. If Jesus is as good and as gracious as Christians say he is, then shouldn't his followers be known above all for their love, humility, and integrity? Shouldn't the church feel more like a refuge of welcome and grace than a place of exclusion or harm? If you've ever felt that disconnect, you're not alone. And if you're open to hearing a more hopeful perspective, I'd be honored to share it with you. Maybe you've stood at the edge of faith but couldn't step in because of what you've seen or of how you've been treated. Or maybe you once believed with your whole heart, but somewhere along the way, hurt, disappointment, or confusion pulled you away. If that's you, I hope the Christians in your life take your questions seriously, because they matter a lot, and you are definitely not the only one asking them. Here's what I hope you'll hear, and I need my own heart to hear it also. The failures of us Christians, as real as they are, don't undo the beauty of Christ any more than a 6-year-old can undo the beauty of a Beethoven piece by playing it poorly and almost unrecognizably at his first piano recital. So let's take a moment to consider what Jesus himself says about hypocrisy, about grace, and about what it really means to follow him. My hope is that it surprises you in the best possible way. Our world is full of religious baggage, isn't it? From emotionally unintelligent leaders to church splits and exclusive cliques, it's easy to start wondering if the whole thing is just a spiritual brand trying to manage appearances while covering up human dysfunction. In a culture that values authenticity and calls out hypocrisy quickly, Christianity can often be labeled as performative and hollow. Maybe you felt that firsthand when the sermon said, "Receive grace," but the church culture said, "Measure up." Or when love was preached, but shame and gossip was practiced. In that space, faith can begin to feel not just difficult, but threatening. But let's take a step back and ask, what did Jesus actually say about all of this? What did he expect from his followers? And was the early church made up of flawless saints? Far from it. From the very beginning, the story of Jesus' people has been the story of misfits, doubters, deniers, and slow learners. Peter denied even knowing Jesus. Thomas questioned the resurrection. Paul described himself as the chief of sinners and really meant it. The church has always been full of broken people, trying, failing, and returning again and again to the mercy of Christ. The Bible doesn't shy away from that reality. It brings it front and center. Jesus never promised his followers would have it all together. What he did promise was his presence, his forgiveness, and a new kind of life slowly taking shape in his followers. The metaphors he used did not include a fortress of pious saints. They were about a field being cultivated, a vine bearing fruit, a patient process of growth. Christianity at its core is not a badge of moral superiority or a mark of a rival. It's an admission of ongoing need, a declaration that we cannot fix ourselves. And that's actually where the credibility of our faith begins. There's a related quote I sometimes think about. It's from Brennan Manning, a former priest and alcoholic, who once said, "The greatest single cause of atheism in the world today is Christians who acknowledge Jesus with their lips, then walk out the door and deny him with their lifestyle. That is what an unbelieving world simply finds unbelievable." That's a haunting observation. And yet Manning's own life also pointed to something deeper, that those most aware of their failure are often the most capable of pointing to grace. Manning lived as a deeply flawed man, even battling the very things he preached about until the day he died. But his message was never "look at me." It was always "look at Jesus," the only one who never fails. So here's the invitation I'd offer to you. Don't let the failures of Christians keep you from the person of Christ. The real question isn't whether his followers have always been faithful, because we haven't. The real question is whether he is faithful. And the testimony of Scripture and of countless lives quietly transformed by grace is yes. Jesus is faithful, even when we are not. One of the most searched questions online is, what is the true church? That tells us something, doesn't it? Most people aren't searching for polish or performance. They're looking for something real and authentic, a community where honesty isn't just accepted, it shapes the culture, a place where masks can come off, where faith doesn't demand pretending but invites truth-telling and responds with grace. And sometimes that kind of church is found in unexpected places, in a group of friends praying for each other's weakness, in a recovery circle that meets in a church basement, in a friend who shows up with kindness when you expected criticism, in a meal delivered quietly when you felt invisible, in a Christian who owns their failure and says, "I'm sorry," and seeks reconciliation instead of doubling down or defending themselves. Maybe the only version of Jesus you've seen has been through people who didn't represent him well. Maybe you've even found yourself thinking, "Lord, I like you, but please save me from your followers." If that's where you are, you're not the first to feel that way. But what if you looked past all of that? What if you opened the Gospels and got to know Jesus firsthand for yourself? Not the secondhand version, but the real thing. What might you see? Who might you see? Let me ask you this. If the church looked more like Jesus, more honest, more humble, more full of grace, would you give him another look? Maybe today isn't about going back to religion. Maybe it's about returning to a person or getting to know him for the very first time. Jesus, the one who welcomed the weary, stood up to the self-righteous and gave his life for unfinished people like us. Jesus is not put off by your doubts, not put off by your questions or by your pain. He doesn't respond with pressure or shame. He responds with kindness. He's not asking you to have it all together. He's simply inviting you to come just as you are. So if you're tired, disillusioned, or not sure what you believe anymore, know this. The first step is not to fix yourself. It's to consider Jesus. Who is he? And what is he like? And when you do, I think you'll like what you find. If this was helpful to you, subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss future teaching. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you next time.